Hi, welcome to Coming to the Faith podcast. My name is Marcos. I'm so happy you can join us. I would love to introduce to you a very special person, someone who I thoroughly have enjoyed not only interviewing, but building a life with, my wife, Johanna Pagan. I pray that during the next hour, you can receive something from her journey and how she got here, and ultimately what led her to the faith. I pray that you are blessed and that you are encouraged. Johanna, my wife, thank you for being here.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate you, sweetie.
You're welcome.
So, format is series of questions. I expand as we go. But question one, who is Johanna Pagan?
Well, first and foremost, I'm your wife, obviously. I'm in the marketplace. I work for a technology company, and I also am part of what you do. You're a full-time missionary. I'm your partner. I'm part of the Eastern Gate House Prayer, and I'm in different things. I do my sets here, part of the young adult ministry, part of the women's ministry, which is so cool. Yeah, that's who I am.
And you wear a lot of hats and you wear them well. So I get a front row seat. So yeah, I'm pretty happy about that. But more specific though, that's who you are now. You've come into these roles later in life.
Mm-hmm.
But like most things, there's always a starting point to something. Baby's not born and it knows how to walk. It, goes through phases. It has to turn over, it has to crawl, take its first steps, fall down, get back up, do it again. What leads you to this point though? Who is Johanna in the respect of what led you to this place? I want to unpack what your coming to faith looks like. I want to unpack what you becoming a disciple of Jesus looks like. But I'm curious to know what led you to this point though. Speak a little bit about that. What events through your life led you to this place? To the person of all those that wears all those hats. What was Johanna then? Before Johanna formally changed her name.
Gotcha.
Who was that Johanna?
All right, so that Johanna was born into what I like to call my kind of crazy home. I had my parents, my sisters. My mom was the one that really paved the way for me finding Christ. She ended up accepting the Lord and then all of a sudden going to all these Bible studies, and we never saw mom at the house. So my sister and I pretty much at that point, we were like, where is she going? What's happening? Why is she never home? So then one day she said, well, you girls are going to come with me. And I'm like, we're going where? Especially because we were brought up Catholic. So we literally went to church on Sundays if we went. And then we did catechism after church. So that's like the only time we were ever kind of like shown about church and Jesus. But my family was believing. They believed in Jesus. And my mom started going to this Bible study and all of a sudden came back with a whole different perspective on who Jesus was. And she accepted the Lord and took us one day to this huge prayer meeting. And my sister and I were like, kind of like, what in the world is this? I was about 15. And at that point, my sister was 12. So we would go with her every Wednesday for the women's meeting. And then we started going Sundays. And all of a sudden, a couple of months later, I turned 16. And I started I remember being in one service and they started talking about Jesus and what he did for us on the cross and all that jazz that comes with that. And I remember being 16 and sitting there and I'm like, oh my gosh, he did this for me. And I remember that moment I came to the Lord. I finally got the guts to go up to the altar and get prayed for. And I did the prayer and I was saved at 16. And then from there, my whole life changed.
Okay, but before we get to that point, which in itself, I mean, obviously, husband, I know a lot of this.
Right.
They may not, but I do.
Yes.
But you said something interesting. You said you were raised Catholic.
Yes.
Now, when you say you were raised Catholic, would you say, was it more cultural? Were you guys devout? Because there's different, a lot, especially in Hispanic culture, a lot of people, yeah, I'm Catholic because that's how they were brought
Right.
up, but they barely adhere to ritual, yet alone any kind of following.
Right.
So are you comfortable saying that you guys were more like, well, we observed, but we weren't like faithful, like, or would you say no, like we took it very serious?
I would say in the beginning of our life, I always knew that I was Catholic. It was a culture thing. My grandmother was, we believed, okay. There was a point where that shifted. And I believe my mom was the one that was looking for more. So we started picking back up. At that point, I was maybe 12 or 13, I believe. And we started going back to Catholic Church more repeatedly, more on the religious basis of every Sunday. And all of a sudden, we got baptized, things we didn't do the correct way in the way that the church normally does it, which is done when, the child is young. There's certain steps to that. So we did our baptism. I ended up doing my communion. And then it began cultural, but I believe that there was a point where we did switch to devout. We were devout for about 3 years. And then all of a sudden, my mom encountered this lady that pretty much showed her the word, and she got saved.
Okay, which leads her to this going to Bible studies, and then eventually you and your sister wind up going with your mom. She just says, "Hey, you're coming with me,"
right?
And then you're witnessing this for the first time.
Right.
So now we get a little bit ahead. What was that journey like, though? Because the one thing I love about when we've spoken about your upbringing, the one thing that to me is beautiful is that you, for the most part, tell us a story from a perspective of both my parents were in the picture and we didn't have a whole lot. We struggled, but the one thing my parents did is they did their best with what they could and how they knew in raising my sister and myself. You don't have to go into a grave amount of detail. We're very vulnerable on this side, but what was the upbringing like? So we know that you grew up Catholic. What was the upbringing like in that home before the transition, the transformation, as it were? What was that like for you?
For me, it was just regular and normal. My parents were funny.
Yes, my father-in-law was hilarious. Well, my mother-in-law too.
They were funny together. But it was normal. My parents had jobs. We went to school. My grandmother lived with us for a huge part of my life. She left when I was around like 11 or 12 to her own spot. So my grandma was always in the house, and it was a different dynamic when she was there, and then when she left, it was a little bit more intimate. Other than that, I think that one of the things that has always struck me about that time, where it was just me, my dad, my sister, and myself, was the shift, the differences, and we started growing up. I mean, we were pretty much preteens when grandma left, so my parents had to deal with a teenager and one that was coming right after me. So their dynamic was funny, I think. But my parents always seemed to be searching for something, for something more. It's like they knew that there was more inwardly, like for their hearts and things like that. That's pretty much it.
Okay, that's fine. So now we go back, pin. So your mom, you get to this place, your sister, your mom, you're exposed. You always knew God. You always, at least based
I
on
always
what you're
knew of
saying.
God.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know of God, and at some point, your family tried to instill the importance of like, hey, like
Yeah.
this is all because of him. Like this is God, and we love him, and so forth. But now you did the whole catechism, you did that whole process.
Mhm.
But now you, how old did you say you were? 16.
16 when
All
I
right,
was saved.
so 16 now, you're older,
Mm.
you're able to capture more, you're able to understand more. Now you're being introduced into the whole different world, this whole different idea
Right.
of what faith is, who God really is, the importance of his son, and so forth. Now, post that encounter, post that prayer meeting or Bible study you attended, what was that like? What was your life like from that marking point? Because clearly there's a transition. It separates from what you knew and what you've been exposed to. Now, what does your life, from your perspective, if you want to expand that thought, you're more than welcome to. But what does that look like for you, Johanna, at that point, post that encounter?
Post being saved.
Well, did you get saved at that meeting?
Oh, I got saved at a church service on a Sunday.
Okay, so you go to this meeting midweek, I'm assuming, at some
Right.
point, or so then you go that following that Sunday, you then go to service? You go to a formal church service?
So my mom started going to the prayer meetings. That's how we ended up at this church.
Okay.
And then we went on Sunday. I got saved a couple of months after because I wasn't really understanding what we were doing. But how I got saved was funny because the lady who ran the Bible study for the women, she had kids. She had 2 daughters and a son, and they were always talking about Jesus like if he were a person. And I knew Jesus as if he was a saint. I don't know if that makes sense. When you're raised one way and then you come into the notion of who the Lord really is. He's not just the portrait. He's not just the figure in the church. So they started talking about him and saying, "Oh, well, we talk to him every day." And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "How?" Okay.
Collect.
Right. So then that happened for a couple of months. And then I turned 16. And I remember it was one Sunday that the pastor at that time, he was talking about this Jesus who's alive, who died for you on the cross. And then something in me like clicked with that message. And I'm like, oh my goodness, right? What this young lady has been telling me for months, it's 100% true. So I was saved at that church service. And then after a while, I started going to that young lady's Bible study because they had their own Bible studies for teens and they had their own way of doing
Everybody
things.
had a group. Everybody had a belonging.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So I started going there. What happened after I got saved was funny because I'm like, okay, I remember saying to myself, I'm saved. What? Okay, what does that really mean? So I started asking questions. Anybody that was around me, I especially like talking to everybody who was older than me because that has always been, I've always done that. Ever since I was little, I always gravitated to the people that were older because I felt like they knew more.
Well, yeah, there's wisdom in that. Yeah,
100%. So I just started asking questions. And I remember where they told me to start reading the word and what they told me to start listening to. And it changed from one day to another. What I knew about Jesus and getting to know him was completely different. It was no longer just, well, you do this prayer and you do this prayer and you do this prayer and then you're forgiven. It is now you go straight to him and you ask him for forgiveness. You have a conversation with him. I remember one of my youth leaders at that time in my life, he said, pull up a chair in your room, put a chair in your room, Jesus sitting there, talk. And I was like, well, that's different because that sounds kind of like spiritism, you know? And I'm like, okay, but it's not. And I knew in my heart. So I started doing that. From 16 all the way to like maybe 19, I would close the door and just stay in my room with Jesus. And my life did change. There were specific changes that happened. I think the things that I used to do before I was saved didn't come into play for me anymore. There were things I pretty much stepped away from. In school, in my friend group, I lost a lot of friends because of it, but ultimately.
So I want you to expand a little bit on that because, we basically, to this point in the conversation, it's mom and dad come together. Pop, there's a Johanna. I'm Catholic. And then at 16, I came to Christ. But you're a human being. We all are.
Right.
We all have our journey. We may not have similar struggles. We may not. But your journey's your journey. My journey's my journey. So, leading up to the point where you come to the Lord, you accept Him at 16, what happened? What was your life like before that, though? Who was Johanna before that, in that, as far as what you're willing to share? Because whatever you share, it's not who you are now. It's who you used to be that led you to the place that you are now. So, with that being said, what was that like, that journey? Because clearly you did that as a teenager. And those years, I don't know, I can't speak for you, but for me, my adolescence was horrible. It was not a good place.
Right.
Things that I'm not proud of, things that they all shaped in me, the maturation process. But, teenagehood's rough. Yeah. Childhoods could even be rough, depending. And again, this is not let's unpack your trauma or toxic whatever. What was that like, though? Because up until this point, you seem to have a pretty decent life. Yeah, I went to church and school, and my parents were there, and they loved us, and that was great.
Yeah.
What was that like, the journey, that road?
Well, my teen years were rough. Yes, my parents were there. We had a normal family life. But I think a lot of it stemmed from the fact that I was always depressed. I was always sad about something. And I can go back all the way to being very young and things that I dealt with and people I dealt with that weren't very kind to me. So growing up in a house, you have your parents, you have your grandmother, but at the same time, it was difficult for me to bring that kind of stuff up because you're brought up like you're good, you eat it, and you keep moving. And that's how I was brought up. So my teen years were rough. In school, I was bullied. I was the big girl. So there was a lot of that. And because I was a big girl, there was a lot of cracking on me, that whole thing. That was really not okay. Like, I was always sad about that. And going to school, I dreaded going to school. But I also had a group of friends, and I go back to those times and I see them as what they are. But I had a group of friends that actually liked me, that loved me, and that helped me a lot through those years. So, yeah, I mean, teenagehood isn't perfect. We all lie, we steal. What else? We do things we're not very happy to say, right?
We do a lot of things that our parents have no
absolutely not
working knowledge of. Yeah.
And it's so funny because I was brought up, my dad was very strict and very overprotective of us. So there was little that I could do without my dad knowing. That man knew everything running around the house. So very difficult to lie to him in his face, but you're a teen. You're gonna lie. I'm not spotless. So I did those kind of things. I mean, in my teen years, it started really young. I had a porn addiction. I went through all that for many years. Just carried a lot of rejection. So that stemmed out in me acting out and me doing things in school and always wanting to be validated by people. Always, like, there was this pleasing factor that now that I look back, I'm like, whoa, that was rough in my teen years. But after I came to the Lord, a lot of that tempered. I won't say that I was completely healed from everything. Absolutely not. Well, I mean, the Lord has taken me by the hand, and He's still healing me to this day. But yeah, that was pretty much my life. And it was always like, if you talk to anybody that knows me, like if you talk to my sister, she'll be like, yeah, she was always pouting, always sad, always had an attitude. 100% true.
I could resonate with you in that respect because I had a similar adolescence in that, I was always the bigger guy. Puberty hit me really, really early. I mean, I was in 5th grade with a full-blown mustache. By the time I got to 8th grade, I was buying Black and Milds and cigarettes for
Right.
other high schoolers and friends and what have you because I looked older. So I get that. And I understand the rejection and being the butt of the joke. I get that. But not because I'm your husband, but I can see the beauty that came out of that. I see the woman that's sitting before me today. So, with that being said, we bless the name of the Lord.
Absolutely.
Thank
Always.
him for his faithfulness.
Glory to God.
And his hand over your life. Now, you said you're about 16 to 19. You're having this encounter with the Lord where you're understanding the relational aspect of him, Jesus, you, Johanna, son of God, now daughter of God. What's that journey look like? So 16 to 19, you're running after it. You're involved in ministry. You're going to you're going to a young adult group, and then at some point you're running one. So what does that look like? What is that journey? So you come to the faith.
Yeah.
You've accepted the Lord. His blood's made you whole. His spirit alive in you. What does that look like?
That journey, now that I think about it, I'm in my late 30s now. And I'm thinking about when there was a fire. And I always say this because I say this even when we're talking to all our friends. There was a fire at 16 that I had never experienced that. And a lot of that came reading the word and seeking Jesus. And it was just a fire that was hard to put out. I'm not going to say I tried things to put it out. No, I always wanted to be on fire for the Lord. But it was rather different because now I'm not just looking at him as a statue that doesn't talk back to me. But now I'm looking at him as this is a person who loves me, who died for me, and who's going to be with me the rest of my life. So from 16 on, I just started running really hard. There were a lot of things too that I stopped doing. And I think that also came with how I was brought up and in the place that was bringing me up and the people that were teaching me about the word, and all that jazz. But it was just, I got up, I prayed, I put my worship music, I took care of my little sister. Because at that point, 16, my mom had my sister. And it was the funniest thing because I would get up, I would pray, and 16 to 17 and 18, a toddler will be right behind me, probably in her own language, praying. It was funny, but
she was your shadow.
Yeah, it was funny because I would put on worship music, and she would lift up her hands because she knew already. So from 16 to 19, that's what I did. I helped my family. I was part of the church in a very, I guess, at that moment, significant way for the ministry. I did discipleship classes. I was running what we called our own cell group at that moment with my partner. I was part of the worship team. It was funny how I came to be part of the worship team because I was always singing around the house, always. And all of a sudden, I started singing somewhere and someone was like, why aren't you part of the worship team? I'm like, I never even thought about that. My mom was the one that kicked me into gear. She was like, go worship the Lord. The Lord gave you a gift. I'm like, cool. So I did that for many years. And that was pretty much how my life was from 16 to 19. Very church heavy, very event heavy. and my own way of learning about Jesus. And I had great people. It's funny because when you have cell groups, you have people that are leads over you. And my leads were great. To this day, I'm very, very thankful for them.
It was a good networking that you had.
Yeah, I had
amongst other believers.
Yep.
Older individuals, people who could speak into your life, people who would model what this life was,
100%.
what a follower of Christ was, that you could yourself apply to your walk.
Yep.
So, all right. So we're getting a picture about 16 to 19.
Yeah.
So Johanna saved at this point, very immersed in the community, seems to have some cage stage where you're just like, I love Jesus.
Yeah.
And anybody who's listening,
100%.
you're sharing your taste of music changes, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I've only known this, so I can't say I know prior, but I'm sure your investments at some point even changed, like how, so 19. So you're now, like you said, you're on your back end 30s. So what does 19 forward look like though?
So 19 was a funny year for me because that's the year that I met you. And it's so funny.
Me?
Yeah. It's so funny because I was, and I'll tell everybody how we met because it's a funny joke. It's a running joke that we met through our friend Tom on MySpace. But no, we didn't. Ourselves. No, absolutely not. I prayed. You came up in my thing. At that point, I was already praying for a husband. I remember
and this is at 19.
At 19, I was very diligent on that. I'm like, because at that point at 19, my parents had split up. And that was a difficult time, right? It's difficult when your family breaks apart. And one of the things I remember praying, I said, Father, I just pray that the day you give me a husband, I pray that we can love each other and that we can withstand marriage and have a family and that you could be the center of it. And it wasn't a judgment to what happened with my family. But at the same time, at that time, I was hopeful that the Lord could help me in that. And that when he gave me a mate, I asked for very specific things when I asked for a husband. And the Lord delivered in every part of them. And I love when I tell that story because it gives glory to God. It let me know that he hears me. He hears me when I ask him for things. And he comes through.
It's putting into perspective our humanity and the fact that we can take that because we make our petitions, our supplications, our prayers, we make them known to him. Him being a good father, he knows what's best and his desire is for us. He's not a bully, he's a gentleman.
Yes.
He'll never impose. But the fact that even in your youth, the fact that you were 19 and looking ahead and be like, this is what I want. And you brought with specificity to the Lord those things in which you were desiring in a mate speak bounds of your heart and the positioning of your life and where you were at. So what does that prayer look like and turn into?
So I was in front of the computer with another friend of mine. And I remember I looked up Christian single men.
Because you could do criteria searches on MySpace back then.
Right. And you were the first person to come up, number one. It was the funniest thing ever. I'm like, oh, he is cute. So I go on your page and I was like, okay. And with my friend there, who at that point, my friend thought I was crazy anyway. I was like, you know what? I'm going to marry that dude in the name of Jesus. And she was like, are you insane? I'm like, no, I just have faith. And then a month later, you showed up at some event my church was having. We were having an event for in the park in Newark.
I remember it was like an evangelical outreach type
exactly.
thing.
And I remember you all came up in the Christian band that you were a part of.
Yes.
And I saw you by the Congos, and I'm like, why does he look familiar? And I turned to my friend who was in the computer, and I was like, that's the guy. That's the guy from MySpace. And she was like, only these things happen to you. And I'm like, okay. So it's so funny because during the event, I was busy. So I was part of the event because of where I was in the ministry at that time. So I couldn't get to you. I couldn't say thank you for coming or whatever the case may be. So when we got home, I went back to MySpace and I thanked you through there. And I remember it was like maybe a day later, we started talking on AOL and we haven't stopped talking since. And yes, we're aging ourselves. We used AIM, yes. Okay? But we haven't stopped talking ever since. And then we got married at 21. Like, it was insane. But it was what I know God had for me, what I asked him for, and what he delivered.
Which, that to me, obviously, I don't know the other side of the story. I mean, you shared with me. I've heard this story dozens of times. I've heard your perspective on it and just how everything happened. I can pinpoint that very day, that Saturday afternoon in Lincoln Park, Newark, New Jersey. I remember it very vividly. But where it draws me to think is like, my mind's so finite and so small that the creator of the universe, who's paying attention to me, listened to the prayer of some random young person, this young female. I'm not aware of what's happening, but he is fully aware and cognizant and listening to your request, your desire. And I'm just going about my business. I was a part of a worship team. I was a part of a musical group at the time. And I have no idea who you are. More specifically, what I do remember is there was a point in my 17-year-old naivete to where I became involved in a relationship. And I remember specifically upon a request made by the person at the time to get rid of every female on my acquaintance friends list thing. And you were one of the people that I asked. You were on the chopping block. Mm-hmm. And then that relationship ended. And then I was like, well, back at square one. So I remember adding you again. I did a criteria search, and I never forget the day I clicked on your profile and I said, I'm pretty sure I know this person, but I didn't. It's that I had added you previously, but because of the relationship I was involved in, that's it. Fast forward, I'm a part of this worship team. We got invited to do the event that you alluded to. And even at the event, I didn't get to meet you. But at the event, there's mutual people that know the both of us.
Right.
And even with that, we're still like opposite sides of the spectrum. We're still not connecting. We're not, there's no FaceTime being made. There's no hello, a glance, nothing. It's just, we're both at the same place, oblivious to the fact that we're there. But God, who heard your prayer, is like, gotta be, I call it behind his screen, and he's gotta be smiling from ear to ear because he's like, these people have no idea what's happening right now.
Yeah.
They're oblivious.
I always thought about it that way.
It's okay though. It's almost like, the little noisemaker confetti things. Mm-hmm. It's like, we both get to the same place. We make no connection, and he goes, poof. Okay. Now it's gonna get fun.
Yeah.
So we have that cordial conversation via AIM.
Right.
Go from there. So we start kind of like speaking, getting to know
talking, getting to know one another, and we started praying together, reading the word together, which was so new to me because I'm like, see, this is what I prayed for. I remember saying that. I'm like, I really prayed that I can, because at that point, I have never had a boyfriend. I never experienced those kind of things. My father that was a no for him. So it was
Oh,
a no all
yeah,
around the house. My
yeah.
dad was no joke when it came to dating.
Oh, you kidding me? The first time I walked into your house, I was just like, you always you warned me. You said,
I
listen,
really did.
my dad's this really big
guy, and he is
guy, and he's
overprotective over his girls.
Yeah.
He was very overprotective,
yes.
and still is in his way.
Absolutely. So but I think, at least I like to think that after meeting one, though, I like to think that, that's definitely one where I won over your dad.
Yeah, he liked you. He really did.
He didn't like a lot.
No, he didn't like a lot of people, no.
Actually, I remember specifically one time you telling me that you and I were on the phone.
Right.
It was really late.
Yeah.
And that your dad was actually surprised that you were on the phone. And he suspected that you were speaking to somebody else.
Yes.
And said to tell that someone else, hey, tell him to hang up and go to bed. It's too late. And you told him, I'm not speaking to that person. I'm speaking to this person.
Right. And he was like, what?
Yeah.
I haven't met that person.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
So then I get to meet him, and obviously, get to
But
see
you met him well after the Lord confirmed that you and I can actually start dating.
Oh, yeah. Because
that was way...
because that dry period, I mean, the simple fact that I speak to you, we post the event, and we get to this place where a really good pocket, and I'm just sharing everything, the good and the bad and the ugly.
100%.
I'm being 100% honest with you and telling you, hey, this is who I am. This is what I've been through. This is, I'd rather you hear it from me than you hear it from somebody else. So with that being said, I share all that. You and I have a conversation till 5 a.m, which I never had. And the fact that we have this encounter, and then I don't hear from you for like a day and a half.
Yeah, you did. I did that. I got nervous because I'm like, this guy, like, I haven't met him ever. Like, I've never talked to somebody till 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, that was weird. I'm like, I'm just going to scratch that because it feels weird. But then, like 24 hours later, I got back on AIM because I was waiting for one of my friends to message me. And you messaged me and you were like, hey, what happened? And I was really honest with you because I was freaked out because, once again, I never dated. I never flirted. I'm still not the best of flirts ever. I'm like, it's not my forte. So that world was kind of like Newfoundland for me. But then you in your funny way, were like, I'm a natural guy. I'm a regular guy. I put my pants one foot at a time. You said something along those lines.
I put on my pants one leg at a time.
Right. So, and after that, I was like, okay, all right, let's give this a chance. And then we just talked for weeks and kept it going. We pray together. We read the word together.
I started visiting your church.
Right. Which was the weirdest thing for me because at that point I was leading worship and I remember you coming through. I was not expecting you to come through the doors in the flesh. And
that wasn't planned, was it? You had made me aware that there was a service, but I didn't necessarily say, hey, see you there.
No, you didn't say, and you just walked in through the door and I lost my footing like 3 times. And then my family was out in the thing and they turned around, they saw you and they were like, oh, yeah, that's why she lost. Like, I remember being one of the 4 leads. And I'm like, at one point, I'm like, I triple stepped that even the person that was next to me leading worship too, they were like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm all good. All good. But yeah, it was nerve wracking.
I remember that day. It was a midweek service.
Wednesday.
Yeah,
our Wednesday service. Yes, sir.
I remember that day because that's the day. By this point, I hadn't met your dad yet.
No, not at all.
So I definitely met your mom.
Yes, you did.
And
my sisters and my boatload of friends that were always together.
Yes. And I remember your mother's reaction.
Yeah.
and she couldn't hide it. My mother-in-law did not have a poker face.
No.
She was basically like
Yeah,
short of
it's
like
hilarious.
he's seating right over there, like so you continue in ministry, you continue to lead, you continue to walk with the Lord best you can. You and I start dating.
Right.
What's that like? What that part of your life where, okay, now you're walking in the faith, best your understanding.
Yes.
I'm walking with the Lord, best my understanding. What does that look like?
It was different because I had never dated anybody. I was not like open to that world. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with Jesus here, you here. I'm like, okay, Jesus is always important. He is number one. But I had to learn that dynamic of that relationship. And you helped me right through it. I mean, you kind of showed me how to do the whole relationship thing, because I had no idea. Like, I remember someone passed away in your family and I didn't go to the funeral. I had no idea that was relationship etiquette because I was not open to that. I didn't understand it. But I think from 19 on, little by little, I started to learn, oh, this is how you do that. And this is how you support that person. And then you met my dad. Then you became a little bit more part of the family in the sense that you did go to Sunday dinners at my mom's. You were around on Saturdays. Fridays, we would hang out because that was the only day we were really allowed to hang out. You had a job. I had a job. Like, we had little things that we were doing. And I was always at church from Monday through like Thursday because I was doing so many things. I was very busy at that time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it was cool. And then we got engaged at 21. And that was funny because you decided to pop the question on January 31st in front of 300 people. And I was like, what? Wow. Okay, cool. So we're doing this. And then it got a little sketchy in the sense of there were things that happened in my family, and all that jazz. My parents weren't together anymore. There was a lot of things happening at that time, a lot of things that we had to maneuver emotionally. And around 2021, I started to lose my footing in the Lord a little bit. Because I'm like,
oh, me too.
Yeah. I was like, whoa, that's different. And then ultimately, I actually ended up leaving the ministry. There were things that happened there that hurt me. There were things that, whatever the case may be, at that point in my life, were just very daunting. So I prayed about it. Even in my whole backslid moment, I said, Lord, I don't think I should be here anymore. What do you say? And I really felt peace to move and to remove myself from the ministry. And at that point, we were engaged when I left. And by that point, my whole family had left. So I was the only one left in the ministry. Correct. And I was like, you know what? Okay, it's time to go. It's time to do whatever is next. And I had no idea what that was. But then we were engaged January. We were both 21. No, I turned 21. You were still 20 at that time because I'm older than you.
Correct.
And then in July, you broke things off. You broke the engagement off due to your own set of things that you were going through.
Oh, the mess.
Yeah, and your own set of pressures from the church because we were being pressured to get married like quickly, and I wasn't prepared, and you didn't feel prepared either. So the pressures of everybody around us just overwhelmed. So we broke up for a while. And during that time of us breaking up, I found who the individual was. Because I feel a lot of the 19 to 21 being with you, and you're the first relationship I ever had, I kind of like, I don't know how to explain it, but I've absorbed a lot of what you were like.
You absorb, you
absorbed a lot of
more of who, and you didn't really have your own personality,
right? Because I had no idea what that was like. But after we broke the engagement and it was a clean break, the Lord opened the doors for my first real corporate job ever. I ended up having a routine. At that point, I was roommates with your mom, which that's a funny story. We'll get to that another day. But I was roommates with your mom, and I got my first real job. And then a couple of months later, I got my first car. And I started finding out who I was without you in the picture, which I think is very pivotal for when we finally got back together and we got married. I learned my likes, my dislikes, what I really like to do. I liked shopping. I went shopping with your mom every other weekend. We did diners. We had an exercise schedule. And I found out who I was. And I actually liked who I was at that time without having everyone's notions of what they wanted me to be, whether it was in ministry, whether it was my home life. That helped me. And then when we got back together, the year after, when we decided we were going to get married, I was like, I think I'm ready for this now.
And even at that point, when we even discussed like picking things back up again, I was still a mess.
Yeah.
I still had 100%. No idea what I was doing.
I mean, me neither.
I was an indecisive, 21, verge of 22-year-old. Like right. I was clueless because as in my finite brain, I thought I messed the bed so bad that that's it.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, because we got to call it what it was.
Right.
At least for me, I will not speak for you, but for me, I wasn't walking with the Lord faithfully by that point when we started back up.
No.
And I think it's safe to say that even how the relationship started back up.
Yeah.
It wasn't one that was centered around the Lord.
Absolutely not. We were both backslidden at that time. You were doing your thing. I was doing mine. Even though I was going to church on Sundays, because Ma was no joke. We got up to church on Sundays. Roommate or no roommate, she didn't care. She woke me up.
Yeah, you want to go to the diner? Great. We'll go right after church.
Right. So I used to go to church, but I was very backslidden. There was a lot of church hurt. There was a lot of regular heart hurt because of everything we had undergone. And
you were going through the motions.
Pretty much. So we backslid, and then the way we got back together was not the best. I do not recommend. Yeah, we fell right into sin. Things that we never did when we were dating like that.
This is a PG show. So
yeah, well, that's why I'm keeping it PG, or whatever the case may be. So, yeah, we fell into sin. And, but then there was a point within that period of time of us not doing what we were supposed to be doing, which was the total opposite, that your mom came up to me because we worked together. And she said, you both need to stop. I've been praying, stop, get married. What is wrong with you people? And then she literally got up and left. And I'm like, she left me right in there after giving me the flu shot. And I was like, oh my God, I felt conviction.
Yeah.
I was so convicted. And then after that, I had a talk with you and we decided to get married.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because I remember we decided to get married August. So I literally said to you, because, we had broken up the way we did, I literally said to you.
This is about a year from the previous.
From breaking up. Yeah. I really said to you, I'm like, if we're going to get married, we're going to get married now. And I'm not giving you a chance to
wiggle my way out of it.
Right. So I said, we're getting married in 3 months. And I made that definitive decision from at the end of August, September, October, November. I remember telling my mom I was getting married. And my mom was like, in 3 months? Like in 3 months? I'm like, yes, Mom.
Oh, I remember when you told me, because there was this glob of sweat that just pivoted right at the corner.
We were really young. What kind of money did we make at that time? None. But the Lord opened up all the doors. I got my dress. I got my shoes. I had bridesmaids.
Oh, it snowballed.
It snowballed and it was beautifully done. And we decided to take a 3-month. That 3 months, remember, I don't know if you remember, but we decided to be celibate during that time.
Hardest 3 months of my life.
Right. But what I'm saying to you is we did it. And we did it in consecration unto the Lord. And I remember that conversation we had, and we said, this isn't right. Let's get married and let's consecrate ourselves until the wedding night. And for that, for us to go through that and do the 3 months and do the cake and do this and do all that, I remember I started opening up my Bible again during those 3 months. And I was still not 100% because we got married, but we were still backsliding.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we were still,
a mess.
But it gave me hope. So we get married, which was awesome. It was November 27th, 2009. It was cold, rainy. It was a mess, but it was the best time of my life. It was nothing grand scheme. It was perfect. It literally, I think that marked who you and I are, who we've always been. That just set the trajectory for us. We've never been very traditional, never.
Far from it.
And I love that. So we get married, we get our first apartment, and we were at a different ministry during that time. Very strong for the Lord. Something happened after we got back. We took a break. We went back to that ministry. Something happened there. And you and I lost all hope again.
Yeah, we fell.
We fell completely.
Fell off a cliff.
I remember, I'm like, this is happening again. How does this happen everywhere we go? Why do we feel this way? We backslid. And then Ma was the one that came up to us the year after. And she was like, hey.
When you say Ma, it's my mother.
Right. Yeah. Ma is your mom. Mommy is mine.
Yes.
So she comes up to us and she texts us. She was like, we're going to church tomorrow. I'm like, we is a lot of people, Ma. We is a lot of people. I mean, I don't know about that. We have a party at our apartment tonight. She literally said, I will be there before 10. Be ready. I didn't take her seriously. I thought, okay, it's Ma. Like, I love her. But I said, no, I'm not going. So we had the party in our apartment and we're all partying and having a good time. We are dancing. What we thought was a good time, that whole thing. So early in the morning, I hear a knock in all the windows in the house. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? I get up. You're still knocked out because drinking all night, we were hanging till like what, 4 o'clock in the morning? Yeah. We just went to bed. So Ma goes, if you have time to get drunk, you have time to go to church. Get up. I'm like, oh, your mom's not kidding. Oh, we going to church. So we ended up coming to church. And it took a couple of weeks because we were both like, okay, this is different. Okay, cool. And then we were both a little culture shocked because we were used to
our tradition,
yeah. Hispanic church with the loud everything. And this was very contemporary. Yeah. But we ended up in a good place. And we're still here. And I'm thankful to God for that. I mean, He's kept us right where we've needed to be. And now we are doing exactly what we need to be doing. So, yeah.
And honestly, I don't even think there's
so much.
Yeah, we have so much that we can definitely pull the string on and unpack.
Absolutely.
So, we reconcile to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
We're under amazing leadership.
Yep.
Not perfect, human as well, but
absolutely.
We're under amazing leadership, and they're working with these ragamuffin 21, 22-year-old, and they're, there's got to be a special, crown for Gary.
100%. I tell him that all the time.
For dealing with us. We were so emotional, immature, and he just like, guys, he kept flocking to us. We were, what was it, almost 3 years?
3 years of the marketplace set, 6 a.m. on Wednesdays.
We had a 6 a.m. set with Gary.
It was great.
3 years.
It was great.
And
he, honestly, because of how his style is and how he pastors, he was one of the people that actually got me to face the hurt that I had encountered.
Confront it, yeah.
And he has probably no idea of this because it's not something that like I've gone into conversation with him about. But the fact that he said, "Oh, you want to do this? 6 a.m. Wednesdays." I was like, "All right, we're gonna do this." Had no idea what a harping bowl, not even, he taught it to us. I think we
showed up, we went to, they happened to, when we came on with him, they happened to be having a harping bowl clinic that weekend.
Right.
He's like, great, you're in.
Yeah,
just come.
And
come
then the next week we start. Exactly.
Exactly. So
and then he really helped me come out of my shell again as a worshiper. He said, sing the Bible, sing it, do it. He was like, this is how it's done. And for 3 years, that's what we did at 6 a.m. We prayed for those in the marketplace. And that will always be a really like amazing part of my journey. Because the Lord knew exactly where to put me, what pillar to use. And yeah.
Okay. So this is my favorite part.
Okay.
Because everybody's answer is different. Your answer is your answer, but it's your answer nonetheless. Right. So we've unpacked who you are. We've unpacked what led you to this place. Not the physical place, although it's a part of the story, but what led you to the faith? What led you to accepting Jesus as your Savior? What led you to becoming a disciple of Jesus? What led you to continue to pick up your cross daily? And you've experienced hurt. You've experienced betrayal. You've experienced the mourning of a loved one. You've gone through a lot that outside of the Lord, I don't know that a sane person outside of the Lord could handle it the way you have. But because of the Lord, but because of his love, because of his mercy, you've endured. And this is not to say that you've endured and you're perfect.
No.
You've endured and have the ebb and flow of walking this life of cruciformity, of walking this life of relationship with the Lord. You know, there's amazing moments, there's powerful moments, but there's moments in the valley, moments that are quiet. And my question to you is, right now where you're sitting across from me, 15 years, not only in this ministry, but 15 years as my wife, as my partner, 15 years of all the things we've encountered as individuals and as a married couple. Leading up to when you were first introduced at the age of 16. If there was one thing or statement or what have you, it's your thought, what would you, Johanna, say to your former self?
Honestly, buckle up and hold Jesus' hand. I don't think that I would ever tell my younger self what to do, because everything that I've gone through, everything the Lord has walked me through, everything, even the season that I'm in now, I would tell her to just hold on to Jesus. And I would, honestly, I would do it all over again if I get another try. The same way, with the same things, because it's made me who I am.
That's beautiful. And it's real. It's honest. And that's what we strive for, is be yourself. We're not methodical robots.
Right.
So I can appreciate your honesty.
Yeah.
And because I know you, because I am your other half.
Absolutely.
I know that everything you're saying is true.
Yeah.
So bless the Lord.
Amen.
Thank you so much for sitting with me. I know this is not your milieu, your cup of tea, but I so appreciate it because
this was fun.
I want to have lay people, regular, everyday people.
Gotcha.
Just because we're Christians doesn't mean we don't have issues. Just because we're believers, just because we're a part of the faith, just because we love the Lord doesn't mean that we don't confront the things that other people may, We're not these perfect button-down individuals. Being a believer doesn't make you sinless.
Makes you sin less.
It makes you want to
Gotcha.
sin less. So that I give that credit to Bernie, Pastor Bernie, all the time, because
Yeah, I love
that's
when he
where I
says
got
that.
it. And to me, I do my best to live with that understanding. All that being said, though, thank you, sweetie.
You're
I love
welcome.
you. Thank you so
Love
much.
you
You did
too.
such a great job. I appreciate it. And until the next time.
Yep.
Thank you so much for watching or listening. I pray that episode blessed you. If you enjoyed that, please tune in every month as we'll have a new voice and a new episode. Until next time, God bless.